Alright, so as you can see, our interaction system is working pretty well at the moment, so that's good. But unfortunately, it isn't replicating over the network properly. As you can tell by all these print strings coming up, they're coming from both clients, which isn't good. So basically, we need to go in here and get this system replicating properly across the network, because that's going to be really important when we start implementing doors in the next one. So let's get right into it. So as always, we find ourselves in Jira and make this make interactions replicate task. And we'll click into that and show you the description. So copy that down. And yes, I did use janky in the description. That's the level of professionalism you can always expect. And we want this to be an engineering task, and under that, interactions epic. And now we can drop this task into the board, then we'll go to the board, throw this into in progress, and then we'll get right into the code. So the first thing we're going to change is in the character ccs.cpp. We have to paste in this logic in begin play. And what we're doing here is we're only starting the seeker if this is a locally controlled character. So take, for example, we're playing in a 2-client configuration. We only care about the seeker going on in the character that we're controlling. Because if you implemented the seeker in all the characters, not just the one we're controlling, then all sorts of weird stuff will happen, and that's why we've been seeing all the print messages and all that kind of stuff throughout our testing so far. So we'll make that change and only enable it for the local client. And now we're off to our interactable actor ccs.cpp, and we need to set this actor to be replicated. And although we don't need anything in here to be replicated across the network, if it is not, then its subcomponent will not be replicated. And we obviously need the receiver component, the keys on there, to be replicated. So that's why we need to do that. And then next up, we'll move down to begin play and add in a has authority check. And the reason we're doing this is because our keys are going to be replicated across the network, and we only want the server to be setting the keys. Because if we have clients setting the keys, then that'll screw up our replication. In general, the server is always the truth of what's happening. So when we're setting something important like that, we always want to be setting it on the server. And then that server underscore notation there is a server RPC. And we'll get into more of what that is shortly. But for now, all you need to know is it specifies that something is going to happen only on the server. Speaking of server RPCs, we go over to our interface, and we want to get rid of that omen thing again. I'm so sick of that, oh my god. But we're going to get rid of this receive interaction there, because we're not going to need it anymore. And we'll paste this in, and basically what we're doing is we're turning our add and remove interaction keys into server RPCs. And the reason we're doing that is, as I said in the last part we were going over there, we only want these keys to be updated by the server, and then that will be replicated out to the clients. So we just want to make sure we kind of have our story straight as to what these keys are, and it's consistent across all the clients. And the best way of doing that is using a server RPC. And you can also see we marked this as reliable because we want to make sure this is done. So when there are network issues, sometimes certain functions will get dropped, and we can't have this being one of the ones that gets dropped. For obvious reasons, because then our interactions will be all screwed up. But you'll see later that I will mark some functions as unreliable. especially when it has to do with animation. Because if I have to choose between the game working as intended or looking pretty, that isn't even a decision for me. And here we have our server RPCs. And notice the notation here where we have to do underscore implementation at the end. That's just notation for RPCs. And we don't want to be doing anything in the RPCs on the interface. We just want this to be overridden. And we had to swap these out to void because you can't have returns in server RPCs. So we now move over to the interaction receiver, and we have quite a bit to do here. So first we're going to throw this function in here, and this is the get lifetime replicated props function, and this is where we kind of declare the variables we want to be replicated. And I don't think we've done this yet, but this is a standard function that you'll be seeing a lot in this course, just like tick in begin play. So our next step is going to be to remove the receive interaction function. And I'm just going to paste in the code. But yeah, just get rid of receive interaction. And then we're going to add back our add and remove interaction key functions. But again, they're server RPCs now. So just copy down that notation. All we're doing is overriding the interface here. No big deal. And now we're going to scroll down and we're going to paste in some additional stuff. And ignore the first function. I'm going to get rid of it in a second here. But the second one is what's called a rep notify. And what a rep notify is it basically is an event that fires off whenever a replicated variable gets updated. So for example here, what's going to happen is our key is going to get added, and we're going to set it to print a message when that happens, just so you guys can see how the rep notify works. We don't really need it to do anything, but I just included it just for learning purposes. And as promised, we got rid of the other one as well. And now we're going to hop down to our protected variables and make an interaction parameters area down here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to make a variable. Well, first we're going to move that one into the parameters because it isn't going to be set in blueprints anymore. And then we'll paste in our new interaction key. And as you can see with the uProperty tag, this is the variable we are going to be replicating using that onRep new interaction key. And the reason we're doing it like this as we get rid of the uProperty on the interaction keys is we could certainly just replicate all of the interaction keys, but instead of that, we're just going to replicate one of them. And the reason for that is because it will just send less data across the network. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're working in a networked game, any area that you can help get a little bit of network performance back, you absolutely have to take it. So even though this is going to be a little bit more complicated to implement, it's definitely worth it. And now we'll hop over to the .cpp and just paste in that include. We're going to need it for some of the networking stuff. And now we're going to hop down here and paste in our get lifetime replicated props. And as you can see, all we're doing is calling the parent version and then adding that do rep lifetime call. And all that's doing is it's just saying to the game, hey, we need to replicate this variable. Pretty straightforward. And then we'll hop down to our interface functions. And the first thing we're going to do is get rid of receive interaction. So we can just delete that. And then we're going to paste in the new implementations of the server RPCs for add and remove key. So as you can see, the only change we're making is we are adding a little prefix to the front of the key before we add it. So this way, when we look at the new interaction key, we know if it wants to be removed or added. And again, another way to solve this would have been just having a new key to remove and a new key to add variable that are both replicated. But again, we want to prioritize replicating as little as possible. So that's why we're opting for a little bit of string parsing instead of replicating more variables. And last but not least, we need to add in our rep notify. And as you can see, we're checking to see if the string starts with an A, because then we know we need to add it. And we're utilizing that helpful right chop function to shorten the string so we only emplace the actual key. And we do the exact same thing with remove, and then at the end we print a message to the screen in green. So be on the lookout for that when we're testing. And then finally we'll move on to the seeker, which is the last class we're going to have to modify. And as you can see, we're adding in a server RPC called execute interaction. And this is where we're going to actually be executing the interaction. And again, it's a server RPC that is reliable because we don't want to be missing this. And as you can see, I added an actor input to the inputs, and you'll see why once we implement the function. And now we'll head over to the .cpp, and we're going to paste in our RPC. And as you can see, all we're doing is just printing a message to the screen, just so you guys can see that it's working. And I also added in something that's going to change the color to silver if the server is the one printing this. I just want you guys to see that the server RPC is doing what I say it is. So we should only see silver and not cyan, because cyan means client, silver means server. We'll then hop down to process interaction, and we need to swap this in right here for our server execute interaction. And by the way, the reason we changed to doing it this way is because to call a server RPC, you have to be possessed by a client. Basically, you have to have an owner. So the interactable actor, because it's just an unpossessed actor in the map, it's actually owned by the server. So a server RPC won't work for it because it's not owned by a client. But the seeker component, on the other hand, is owned by the character, so it is able to have a server RPC on it. So now that we're done with the C++ stuff, I'll build and we'll get into testing. And just make sure it's set as play as client in 2 clients. And you'll see here we have our messages for getting the keys added. And then now, as we approach the little box, we only have one message being printed, and it's from the server. Because remember, silver is server. And yeah, our replication is looking pretty good now. So now we'll quickly speed run the review process. Starting, of course, with packaging up our project. So platforms, windows, package, delete the old one, start the new one, and I'll skip ahead until it's done. Alright, so we're all packed up, and here's the packaged build, and see that it's still working, because technically when we are playing in standalone, we are the server, because we have authority, and that's how Unreal works. It's the server client model. In standalone, you're essentially acting as the server. So everything's looking good here. And now we'll quickly hop into the board, throw this into review, and we're going to take a quick look at our pore force change set, and we'll send it on its way. And as we hop back to our board, throw this into done and add our comment. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.